So how can I be of use to you? You're all busy people. I think I can try and give you a few big thoughts that I've kind of tried to formulate as I look back on what's basically been a decade or more of writing columns from places that have been very much affected by populism, by economic nationalism, by a sense that politics has changed in ways that professionals like me probably took a while to see coming. Across the rich world, voters feel that they've been exposed to competition which is unfair and unbearable. And some of that competition comes from foreigners far away because of globalization, places like China. Some of that competition comes from foreigners close at home because of immigrants who are supposedly simultaneously stealing jobs and going on welfare, which is hard for both to be true, but you hear both at the same time. Some of that competition comes from machines, and I think that's a story that hasn't even begun to run its course. Some of that competition comes from things that we at The Economist celebrate: the rise of women in the workforce, the rise of non-whites in the workforce. But that's real. That is a form of competition. If you look at the voters for a lot of these populist parties, they are people whose economic and social power, whose cultural power has declined in relative terms for reasons both good and bad, and avoidable and unavoidable. Those voters, they very strongly feel that something which should by rights be theirs has been taken from them, and that if politicians were doing their job properly, or if politicians could be trusted, or if politicians cared about them, politicians would protect them against that competition which feels unfair or unbearable. The problem is the responsible mainstream politicians know that to give people the protections that they seek, either by building a wall, by closing off markets, by walking out of free trade pacts, by leaving the European Union, that will raise barriers to competition that could really hurt their economy. So they're paralyzed in place. And the populists take advantage of the vacuum. And the great trick of the populists is to tell people stories about how this is a story of good people and bad people, and the bad people chose to do this to you. So what do the mainstream politicians do that they're getting wrong? Why are mainstream politicians struggling to push back against this wave of populism, this story about bad people who chose, because they don't like you and because they're selfish, to expose you to this competition? Well, I think that mainstream politicians are getting two big things wrong. The first big thing that they get wrong in lots of countries, I think, is what I have called in columns homeopathic politics. Now, homeopathic politics, I apologize if you believe in homeopathic medicine, I personally don't, but I think that the theory of homeopathic politics is that a tiny dose of a bad idea will break people's fever, that you will give them enough confidence that they will then support you rather than the populists. So what voters hear is, you are right to want protectionism, or you are right to want nativism, but I, the mainstream politician, I am too much of a coward to give you anything more than a tiny dose. And then a populist comes along and says, I will give you prescription strength bad ideas. And that wins. You see this again and again. If you're going to go for the half Eurosceptic, why not go for the full Eurosceptic? The second big thing that I think mainstream politicians get wrong, and I would also include in here kind of experts in general, and if I'm going to be honest, I should probably also include in that papers like The Economist or the New York Times or the Financial Times, is we tried to push back against populists with spreadsheets. They had stories with heroes and villains and good people and bad people, and we had spreadsheets. So take a classic example. Whenever I meet people who are not from the US and they're trying to understand the phenomenon of Donald Trump, pretty much the first question they ask me is, how come the voters who voted for Donald Trump haven't noticed that often he's not helping them, that he's not delivering his promises? Why aren't they turning on him? And I think that's to misunderstand exactly what Donald Trump was offering. When Donald Trump said to coal miners in West Virginia, I'm going to give you your job back, what he was saying was, you're good people. I like you. If you're a coal miner in West Virginia, you're a blue-collar aristocrat. That's the meaning of coal in West Virginia. You earn a six-figure salary, and you earn it by doing a job that is dangerous, that can kill you, that can make you sick. In exchange for taking that risk as a coal miner, your kids wear the best clothes of any kids at school. You have the biggest car in your drive. You have the best house on your street. That makes you a good dad, makes you a good husband, it makes you a good man. And Donald Trump's story was, I'm going to make you that good man again. I'm going to help you take back control of your life and be a good dad and a good husband, because I think that when you dig coal out of the ground, that's a good thing to do. That's a virtuous thing to do. Whereas the wicked liberals, they think you're a bad person. They think you're poisoning the earth. They believe in this thing, global warming and climate change. And telling people a story about good people and bad people, about heroes and villains, is a very powerful thing to do in politics. And people like us who are trying to fight back with spreadsheets, we were also, if you really think what we were trying to do, we were saying, don't believe this man, he's a con man. If you fall for him, you're like a con man's marks, you're his chumps, you're stupid. Well, voters don't like being told that they're marks for a con man. They don't like being told that they're stupid to believe this promise that is making them very happy. So what can politicians do to fight back? Is there any kind of grounds for hope at all as we fight back against the populists? So don't use homeopathic politics. Don't promise the same things but in a smaller dose in the hope that that wins trust. I think also don't ignore the potency of stories. I think you need to look at that impulse that people have, that they want to be protected, but you have to try and turn that into something that doesn't damage the economy. I'll end with a thought about competition, which I think competition for me explains a tremendous amount about the way that the world is dividing at the moment, attitudes to competition. In English, as you're very familiar as lawyers, the phrase we use is fair and unfair competition. You can measure it, you can come up with numbers, you can make a legal case on the back of it. The word in French or in Spanish or in Italian for the exact same thing is disloyal competition. Concurrence déloyale, desleale, déléale. And I think that although it's the same legal concept, I think in there you can see a germ of something very cultural, that if you're an Anglo-Saxon, the opposite of competition is a monopoly. If you're from the other view of competition, imagine a kind of hill town with a few bakers and one baker lowers all of his prices. The other bakers, they go to him and they go, we can't make money at this price. The Guild of Bakers has had a meeting. You need to stop being a disloyal baker because the guild is suffering here. And that fundamental belief that competition is at best sort of a necessary evil, I think is very, very profound. And I think that one of the interesting things about Donald Trump, and I've tried to explain this to American pundits. So I go on American public radio quite a lot and sometimes on TV. Very early on in Donald Trump's time, I would find myself in studios with American pundits going, yeah, I don't really get where he's kind of a bit like a Democrat because he doesn't want to reduce Social Security. He doesn't want to tackle entitlements. He's pretty happy with having big deficits. So maybe he's a bit of a Democrat. He's not really a Republican at all. And yet he's very authoritarian. He's very into kind of tough law and order policing. He's very anti-immigrant. I don't see where this guy is coming from. He's not a Democrat or Republican. And I think it was an example of a time when actually to be a European in America was an advantage. Because if you're a European, the Donald Trump political mix, generous welfare for our people, often older people whose ancestors are buried in the cemetery up the hill, not touching entitlements, not worrying too much about deficits, strong military spending, but you don't want to use the military on sort of nation building and democracy promotion, authoritarian, law and order, anti-immigration, anti-Muslim. That is basically the Front National platform. It's basically the platform of Geert Wilders, the far-right leader in the Netherlands. So I think that Donald Trump, among other things, is an exotic European import. The thing that I love about America as I leave America that makes me want to kind of still place a big bet, I am long America as I leave, is that this is a place where the stranger who turns up in town with the best idea gets to pursue that idea, gets to compete with incumbents in that town. That's sort of the core of the American genius, is to take the world's smartest and most energetic and competitive people, bring them in and turn them into Americans. Served you very well. I'm very proud my kids are American for that reason. I worry that what we're turning to at the moment in American populism is much more kind of European, this idea of the right people, the wrong people, that you can somehow never escape that fate, that if you weren't born here, if your grandfather wasn't born here, that you're somehow the wrong kind of person. That strikes me as profoundly un-American. So I'm going to end with a sort of global geopolitics thought of where this goes to. What worries me a lot is one of the fundamental things that links economic nationalists and these populist nationalists is they're not very interested in the fact that foreigners have politics too. They are inclined to think that on our side we have democracy, we have rage, we have angry voters. On their side it's a kind of technocracy, that they will see, they'll do the deal with us because they need to. So Donald Trump's big bet is that the Chinese will basically buckle on this trade fight because they're an exporting power. They need to preserve their market access to the US, and so he can pick any number of fights with the Chinese and they will buckle. But the point is the Chinese have politics too. If you want to pick a nationalist anger contest, I wouldn't pick it with China. They have deep reservoirs of nationalist anger they can turn on like a tap. Just to end on a Brexit note, I think the British Brexiteers, there's a remarkable thing. They say, on our side of the English Channel, it's all rage and public will. We have to listen to the angry people. And then you say, so how are you going to do a good deal with Europe? Oh, well, on their side of the English Channel, in Germany, they want to sell German cars. In Britain, they want to sell Prosecco in Britain. So they're just going to, the CEO of Volkswagen is going to phone up Angela Merkel and say, do a good deal, give them whatever they want because I want to continue selling Mercedes-Benz in the UK. Well, why is it all democracy on our side of the English Channel and CEOs telling politicians what to do on their side of the English Channel? They have politics too. So I'll end with that thought. Very happy to take your questions. So I worry that this is not just a dangerous moment in economics, but also in politics too, that these populist forces, we're fighting them in the wrong way. We haven't come up with arguments that can beat them back. We're playing spreadsheet politics. They're playing heroic narrative politics. And I think that their economic nationalism turns into kind of nationalist foreign policy that is going to make the world a very bumpy place, because we could end up in a world with more barriers, less trust, and more barriers to competition. So thank you very much.